it on. Shout, shout, time to shout. Oh baby girl, shout your secrets. You've been forcing out your mouth. Keep it, oh baby girl, shout your secrets. Confession isn't upon your weakness. Oh baby girl, shout.
Adrian, Murdoch, thank you for joining us at the I Could Change Impact Leaders webinar. I must say that looked like a lot of fun, that event, and we're going to talk about the events that you run. You are the Strategic Relationships Lead at Minus18. Thank you for joining us here today.
No, it's my pleasure.
Could you start by telling us what does Minus18 do?
Yeah, so as you said, love that video. Takes me back. That was about 5 years ago, Queer Ideas Festival. But we're really all about LGBTQIA plus young people. So our mission is really creating Australia, which is inclusive and supportive of queer young people all across Australia. So going back, we're actually about 25 years old now. We started in 1998 when a really proud mum, Nan McGregor, made the first Minus18 event for her gay son and their friends, just noting that there wasn't safe spaces for LGBTQIA plus young people to come together, and how invaluable it was to have something that was safe, accessible, and a really positive and affirming environment. So that first took place in Melbourne 25 years ago. And if you fast forward to today, we do events all across Australia. We do them digitally, we do them in person, we do huge events like Queer Ideas Festival and Queer Formal, through to smaller workshops and creative style ones. So yeah, really come a long way.
And what inspired you particularly to join Minus18?
I think for me, going back, I started about 6 years ago. So this was during the marriage equality postal survey, and I had just finished studying marketing, working at a social media agency, and really wanted to do something to give back to the community. And in that time, I reached out to Minus18 because I had a small familiarity through some friends who had worked there, and it was a really small team, a team of 5 at the time. And I started as a social media volunteer because there was a one person doing marketing 3 days a week. But I wanted to find a way to use what I had learned and give back. So yeah, I started then, I think mainly because that awareness piece, that I didn't know Minus18 existed growing up. And I think to be a queer young person, knowing it exists and accessing it is one thing, but even just having that assurance that there are spaces for LGBTQIA plus young people where you can make friends in that 12 to 19 age bracket would have been really affirming. I think my experience growing up in high school was very isolating, which is a very common experience. So knowing that there is a place for queer young people together, I felt like I could really contribute to sort of amplifying that message. And 6 years later, here I am through an evolution of working in marketing, working in partnerships. Yeah, really fell in love with our mission to create that more inclusive Australia, help us be that charity for queer young people, and really work towards changing what we see of 2 in 3 queer young people still experience discrimination every day within Australia across the year. So how can we make everyday experiences where they can feel safe and feel celebrated?
And I appreciate you starting to touch on some of the statistics. They were surprising to me in an early conversation we had, just the extent to which not only are young queer people experiencing abuse, but that number is much more significant than I imagined in terms of those who identify as LGBTQIA+. Could you just sort of give us the sort of overall stats currently, how it stands amongst Australian youth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with La Trobe, who do a really important study, a longitudinal study called Writing Themselves In. So every 10 years they do a research piece. So the most recent one was in 2021. And the big takeaway was that stat of 2 in 3 LGBTQIA plus young people still experience discrimination every year. So that could be harassment at school, in the workplace, and what we see that is an increased suicidal ideation as well, which is 5 times higher than the general population. For trans youth, that's 15 times higher. And I think we can really sort of see a snapshot that in the type of climate that we see in the news and in media as well, and the focus that's there. For us, creating a future that is really supportive of queer young people really meant that we took a lens of, making these safe spaces, but we've also really grown to empower allies and empower workplaces, schools to go on that journey with us as well. So that evolution of doing free, safe events, which reach about 5,000 young people every year, which is amazing. We needed to take it further. So that's why we started to work in education, delivering workshops in schools, delivering workshops at workplaces, and driving campaigns as well to bring in awareness and open that conversation up so we can really start to make that change.
I'm curious, do you think it's improved in schools over the last decade? I mean, I remember when I was at high school, there were, young guys that I was friends with who were gay, and they were given a hard time. And I remember really feeling quite distressed at how uncomfortable and challenging it was for them. There was very much the sort of dominant masculinity, which was, largely straight and largely, defined itself by who excelled on the football team and the field. And that was the dominant version of masculinity. I mean, it still is to a large degree, yet I would expect and hope that there has been there's far greater acceptance and of people from all identification. I mean, do you feel we're heading in the right direction as a community?
Yeah, look, I am optimistic, and I think we do see some glimmers that there has been some positive change. So that longitudinal study, Writing Themselves In, if we go to the study 10 years prior to that, that stat reflected 75% of LGBTQI plus young people experiencing discrimination and harassment within a year. So to see that shift to 67%, I think, is one quantifiable way that we're making some progress. Very small progress. And we can be leaps and bounds ahead of that. I think the way that we engage with young people, though, a lot has changed in 10 years as well. I finished high school just over 10 years ago as well. And the way that when we speak to youth and young people, there's such an increased awareness around diverse identities. And we see that in the language that they use. I think, of course, largely influenced by having access to the internet, those sort of feelings of isolation and hiding away that part of yourself. I think young people feel a lot more equipped to explore that, and might find peer support online, or find different services, or find an organization like Minus18 and give them a little bit more confidence that they're not alone in that. So yeah, I have a lot of faith, having engaged with young people, and see the way that they don't only talk about their peers within the community, but also they talk about other diverse identities. I think for youth, they really understand what systems exist and what sort of really propels a lot of the oppression and discrimination that we still see. And they seem really motivated to sort of tackle that. And, we even see that in the way that young people are really inspired around climate change, and they want to have those conversations. So I think we will continue to see that progress, and they have that awareness to drive that.
So let's dive into what makes Minus18 unique in respect to your focus and methodology.
Yeah, so for Minus18, as mentioned, so our focus is on queer young people, and that's really on a theory of change that's all about harm prevention and health promotion. So a real preventative model in the way that we can tackle social isolation, creating spaces where young people belong and they can be themselves. And our specific model is a response to the huge demand that we see on the types of direct intervention, such as models of counselling, because there's such huge wait lists that often exceed 6 months to access that support. And so for us, we want to be that service that can hopefully get in there earlier. And I think the most important piece there is that peer support. And for a lot of us who come from community, we can totally understand and connect to that piece around feeling like you're the only gay person in school, or being a trans young person in school and feeling really isolated or segregated and not being able to connect or talk to someone who can understand that lived experience. It makes a world of difference to not only have that connection point. For anyone growing up, we want to be able to talk about those everyday experiences. So creating a space where you can have those friendships much earlier than what might be at university, or once you get into work, or create new friendships outside of that high school experience. That's really important, and we really see a shift in the way that those young people take those friendships quite outside out of their time at maybe attending Minus18 events. They might come to events for a year or two, have that new friendship and go into new spaces together. But what's really resilient there is the fact that that's someone that understands with a lot more depth, and someone that they can have a lot more of an open, vulnerable conversation about where they're at on their journey, and hear that from someone else as well.
It's so critical, isn't it, as a foundation for young people, or for all of us really, to have a sense of community and a sense of belonging, and the isolation, or at least belief that one is being judged, has enormous impacts on mental health. And so can you talk us through, because you do have a unique model around the training and educational offerings that you deliver. Can you talk us through how they work and the impact that you're seeing on those that you're working with?
Yeah, so our workshops, really is about that inclusion training or queer youth empowerment. And we take that to schools, workplaces, and the broader community. The focus there is for queer young people to be able to feel more confident, to feel more comfortable in themselves. So when we take our workshops into schools, that could be a module 1, which is all about an introduction to sexuality and gender identity. So having LGBTQIA+ presenters from community, young people themselves, who can start that session through a bit of a personal narrative and talk about their own experiences growing up queer. And I think that builds a lot of respect and empathy. And when any time we go into a classroom or a school, it's not specifically to speak to just queer young people. Of course, we want to speak to students as a whole. We want to build peer empathy. We want to build respect, and we want people to kind of connect. And that's really hard for teachers who might not be LGBTQIA+ themselves. So to come in as someone neutral and as someone from community and talk about that, I think we really can break through. And we see that from the evaluations that we do with the participants. Up to 96% of students feel more prepared to support peers, and they feel better prepared to stand up against LGBTQIA+ discrimination by having those tools and having that open conversation around, this identity piece isn't as taboo as it might feel, when often it's sort of avoided in schools. And again, that's an experience that I can really connect with. I remember growing up in the deep western suburbs of Melbourne, and at a school of 1,200, a high school of 1,200, we didn't have any rainbow flags. There wasn't any openly out teachers or students. So it just felt really taboo to even sort of talk about, and feel really isolating. So I think to give it a voice and give it a platform, and for that to come from someone from community, really connects with young people and gives them a space to ask questions as well, to narrow in on their knowledge and their learning, and help them to connect with it and comprehend. And it's really motivating to sort of hear the feedback. One of the ones that we had earlier in this year was from a student who reflected on how supporting their friend who was unsure in themselves and making them feel valid in their identity was an outcome that they had from participating in that. And one supportive friend, going back to that piece of a preventative model versus someone who needs that intervention, can really start there.
It's in some respects, such fantastic and important work that you do, and it strikes me how sometimes you just have to provide the framework and the language and the tools, and give people permission, and that can open up a whole new conversation and kind of almost liberate everyone from not knowing how to kind of address, communities that they may not identify with. And so it sounds like you're providing that framework and that context and kind of upskilling everyone in a school environment.
Absolutely. And, that piece around language and a framework and having a conversation, we have a particular lens of how we can talk to young people about that. So really simplifying it as well. And I think that really resonates with adults and adult allies as well, that it can be really intimidating to talk about what you don't know much about. And I think people want a bit of a safe space to do that. I can understand and have had many, many conversations around people who find it really confusing to understand pronouns. And, I think pronouns have become a lot more widely adopted. But of course, if you've never had that exposure before, it can feel really intimidating to ask. It might feel like, you should know and that you might be judged for that. And then, when you take the same lens to young people, they don't know what they don't know. And so if you don't give them that space in the forum to, talk about gender neutral language or why that's important or how empowering it is when we use pronouns, I think what's really resonated for Minus18 is that everyone wants that respect too, to kind of go on that allyship journey. And when you give them that space, people are really warm and receptive to it. They really want to come into an environment where, they can ask those questions. They can ask, what is the I in LGBTQIA+, because I have no idea, and not feel like I'm going to be instantly judged for that. So I think, as you said, being able to kind of have a language and framework, but I think taking it from a lens of welcoming people into that space has been really important for us.
Do you think the Me Too moment, in some respects, was supportive of being able to have a broader conversation with the LGBTQI+ community? Do you think there's a sort of a similarity there? I mean, there's been so much sort of progressive thinking done in this space that has been accelerated over the last even 24 months. What are your thoughts around that kind of pivotal moment in time, and where so many women stepped forward and said, yeah, me too, I've been abused? This is a community, it would seem, that has often suffered somewhat in silence. And so I'm curious, perhaps, if you see a link there and how that may have been created a more solid foundation for the LGBTQI+ community to really step forward and own their conversation in a way that perhaps might have been more challenging earlier.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a parallel when we look at what really mobilized the Me Too movement, and looking at the importance of giving people a platform, and I think people stepping in as allies to amplify that. So the power of what happens of when you give the mic to those people who are most oppressed. And in those early days of Me Too, looking at the experiences of women, which had been so systemic, and there was a whole infrastructure that sort of supported that oppression. When we look at the experiences of the LGBTQIA+ community, there's so much power of when the people who are at the heart of that oppression are given that platform. And so it takes allies to recognize the power that they have and take a step back and give that to those who have been oppressed, just to say, hey, share your voice, I'll amplify your voice, I'll listen and I'll hear you. That kind of learning can be taken to sort of so many different spaces of social change, with marriage equality, with the work in the space on trans justice, even The Voice, being able to look at ways where that community who is looking for change is given that right platform to do it. It all comes from working to shift that piece of the system that has kept that oppression for so long, and you need some of those enablers to help make it work.
And of course, making all this work requires funding. to run these workshops and to have a great team around you. Where is most of the philanthropic funding coming for Minus18, and what might be part of some of the unique challenges given the current economic climate?
Yeah, we've definitely felt the impacts, as I'm sure most have, of the last, probably close to 24 months now of the economy. And I think when we look at from a philanthropic lens, we've seen about a 30% decline in fundraising and donations from an individual level, which absolutely makes sense given the constraints around cost of living. But we also know, though, specific to the LGBTQIA plus community, that in Australia, only about 1% of all charitable philanthropy goes to LGBTQIA plus issues. So it's less than $1 from every $100 donated, proportionate to a community that represents about 10% of Australians. Other reports, Give Now does a lot of work in this space, average that as being even much, much lower. I went for the one that was highest to try and be conservative about it. But yeah, some reflect it being 5 cents from every dollar that's donated. So I think for us, there's already a back foot that we're working to sort of change and create more of an awareness to it. I think marriage equality helped to sort of propel that and drive that. But I mean, yeah, where we're looking to make scale and impact and create inclusive change, funding to do that is so instrumental. When it comes to workshops, our mission is to remove all the barriers to do that. To go to a school and deliver inclusion training, we'd love to do that for free for every school, and we're slowly getting there to kind of create that that system where every school who reaches out to us, we have a free offering to them, which is really exciting because at the moment it is a fee-for-service model. We do inclusion training for workplaces, corporate organizations. That is that paid model, and that often helps to subsidize. Yeah, looking forward and working with I Equals Change, that's been really a focus of us, is how can every dollar go towards what has been so impactful to creating change in schools and supporting young people so early in their journey, and help to create allyship in such a pivotal space.
So the hairy, audacious goal is to roll this out nationally. Would that be accurate? Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. Well, we definitely want to help you to make that a reality. So to come back to your work on a daily basis, what are some of the unique challenges and joys of your work?
That's a good question. I think, for me, one of the challenges, which is a good one, is that demand for that inclusion training, for us to go to schools, go to workplaces to deliver that training. So as a team, we've grown hugely. I mentioned before, when I first started, we're a team of 5 working a few days a week. We're closer to a team of 20 now working full time. So we've really grown and evolved over the last sort of 6 years, and going back to when the foundation really started in 2011. So I think just meeting that demand, the barriers, as I also mentioned, of schools, to choose how they use what is often limited resourcing. So from a regional rural community or lower socioeconomic area, how they can justify to use their funding to do workshops. Again, that's been a bit of a challenge, but we've found that model and rhythm to really prioritize being able to always provide a free workshop there. I think, that then brings in a lot of joy. When we look at the responses of parents and young people of doing that training, we can really see how it can bring a family together when a parent sort of finally can sort of start to feel like they can connect the dots, or a teacher feels like they can support a student, or giving that belief to a young person that actually it really does get better, because that can feel a bit of a myth in high school. So I think hearing that real-time feedback, seeing that positive change, it's really motivating, especially when you constantly have that lived experience. Everyone who works at Minus18 is LGBTQIA+, so be it gay, queer, trans, gender diverse. So we also have to travel through the rhetoric that's often in the media and the debates that come up. So, our kind of personal resilience, I think our tank gets filled up often by seeing that real change that, we get to enjoy by delivering this work.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful to hear. And I also note we've been able to raise for you so far $4,000 and counting. We do want to raise for you a lot more so we can help you reach that goal of scaling out the across those the schools to be able to deliver this training nationally. What just to give people a snapshot, because $4,000 is not huge, but it's not tiny either, right? And it can have a meaningful impact. Can you share with us what does that level of funding provide, and what impact can it have for the people that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, when Equal Change reached out to us with the opportunity to sort of work together and be that enabler and help to mobilize our work, and when we reflected around 81% of students believe their school doesn't support them, LGBTQIA plus students, that teachers weren't doing enough to stop bullying, and education for students and teachers is key to creating a stop to that discrimination both in and outside of the classroom. The focus for us is really clear to us that we can work together in this space. And so on average, it costs about $15 per participant in a workshop. So in the very short time we've been working with Equal Change this year, to already raise $4,000 is more than 300 participants who have been able to participate completely for free. So I think, when we zoom out, that's more than 10 classrooms. And quite often we work with maybe a grade of year 9s or year 10s at a school, but 300 extra participants on the work that we already do. It's 300 young people who feel a lot more empowered to support a peer or a queer young person who feels seen and validated. But I think that main point for us is the strategic focus on our end to make sure that we prioritize those schools in regional rural Australia, or those schools who might have reached out to us and said, hey, we want this support. We're a little bit unsure if we'll be able to afford to book a workshop. We understand this has costs, but the best thing ever is to turn around and say, hey, great news, it's funded. We can cover this for you. Don't even stress it. We can do that 90-minute session. We can have your class come together as a teacher. It alleviates a lot of that responsibility if they want to talk to this, but they're feeling a little bit nervous, that someone can facilitate a really safe space, talk from their own lived experience, and really captivate that group of young people. So yeah, to already in that short time, be reaching 300 young people is really awesome. It could be a student one, it could be a teacher workshop. I love when we get to do a teacher workshop. One recently we did was for 50 teachers. That's 50 different classrooms where what they've learned they can kind of take into that space as well. But yeah, we're just getting started.
I love that. And how many schools are there nationally that you could be working with?
Thousands.
Yeah.
So for us, we've done well to sort of work, particularly in Victoria, which is where we're based. Minus18, our office is in the Victorian Pride Centre on Bunurong country. But we've really started to accelerate that national reach, particularly during COVID. It was a bittersweet silver lining that digitization of workshops means we've delivered in every state and territory across Australia, from Alice Springs to Broome to Townsville. It's really amazing to sort of see now that there's one barrier removed, but at the same time being able to sort of scale up. We've done some fly in, fly out, where we'll visit a hub for a week and deliver to all of those communities in an area. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was thinking how technology can really help you scale your impact, rather than obviously flying to every school and traveling. And yeah,
again, it removes a lot of the barriers. It's environmentally a lot better than flying all around across Australia, but from a lens of the cost as well that's associated with it.
Yeah.
In the past, we've had schools who say, hey, we really want this training. We will fly you in and out. We'll get you organized with accommodation. And it's great that they've got that resourcing, but that's just not really available to most. So for us to be able to say, hey, set us up in the computer lab, set us up in the classroom on the projector, there's still moments of engagement and participation throughout. We know that when working with students, we got to keep them captivated. So we have that interactivity, there's questions, there's prizes. We really want to make sure that we have their full attention. And I think we've come a long way since 2020, that kind of digitization, to sort of find that sweet spot where we still see the same outcomes and impact from a digital workshop as an in-person one.
Yeah. Fantastic work, Adrian, and you're still in the early days of your career, and it'll be exciting to see the extraordinary impact that you're going to create at Minus18 and possibly somewhere else years into the future. It's always an honor for us to meet such passionate people who are really dedicated to an issue that they hold dear to their hearts. I'm curious, this is a question I like to ask everyone at the end. In many years from now, and when you look back on your life, what do you think you might feel most proud of?
That's a good question. Maybe from the lens of like a lot of what we've spoke about today, the optimism that I have with the generation that we get to connect with. So working with LGBTQIA plus young people 12 to 25 and their friends and peers, working with students from all across Australia. As I said, they're really motivated, and they really want to create a more inclusive future. So seeing our young people become change makers themselves makes me really proud, and I think would really fill my cup into the future. A lot of the time, our attendees who might come to their first event when they're 16, 17 years old, often join up. We have another program called Young Leaders, which is for queer young people 18 to 25, which is a 10-month program where there's professional development, soft skills and training, connection, and they help to deliver the events themselves. So our attendees, are greeted by queer young people themselves who facilitate it, help to design and program it, and seeing those young leaders really evolve in their confidence and the change that they get to make. And then now that I'm kind of coming into sort of 6-7 years at Minus18 and being in the sector, I've also seen them to go on to work in other organizations themselves. And it's really empowering to sort of see that, here's a young person who was able to access this space, who then gave back, and now they're continuing to take that into other environments and kind of advocate for that as well. Their desire to challenge the status quo and their curiosity and desire to tackle systemic changes, being able to give them the tools to be like, go do it. For us, being a lot of us in our like kind of early 30s, we need to look at that next wave of young people who have just come out of high school themselves and who are really connected with that experience. And again, going back to what we said, make sure that they've got a microphone and they're empowered to, really connect the dots of what's important to those young people and what kind of future they want.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And so for any businesses listening, I Could Change is a powerful way to support extraordinary not-for-profits like Minus18 to empower young people across Australia who identify as LGBTQIA+. And this is a platform where not only does it do incredible work for the NGOs that you'll be supporting, it's also designed to drive that value and engagement from customers back to the businesses themselves. We do have one question for you, Adrian, from Instagram. What upcoming initiatives or projects does Minus18 have in the pipeline that individuals can get involved in?
I love this. There's always something. I think most timely at the moment, as we look ahead to November, is Trans Awareness Week. So Trans Awareness Week runs November 13th to the 19th, and ends with Trans Day of Remembrance on the 20th. But I would encourage any business, any individual to use that as a moment to get on board, really learn and listen, elevate trans voices. I think it's not lost on anyone that there's a lot of rhetoric and debate that's quite harmful in the media at the moment around trans issues. And I think for Trans Awareness Week and looking to LGBTQIA plus organisation, looking at trans-led organisations about ways to be an ally, ways to educate, those around you, and taking that time to access what is a plethora of resources is a really great opportunity. And if it's Minus18, we have that the workshops that we do for schools, we've got the same for workplaces, which include modules on trans allyship, trans inclusion in the workplace. We also have anything around how you might want to activate and facilitate spaces as well. So that might be getting a trans pride pack, which has posters, conversation cards that you can bring into the office. But then I'd also encourage you to look at so many of the other fabulous trans organisations in Australia who are doing such monumental work in this current climate. Transcend, Transgender Victoria, if you're based in Victoria. But yeah, it's what a perfect window to get so much information and have some really good conversations.
Thank you for the question. And Adrian, thank you for your time today. And you've got a lot of work ahead of you and doing incredible work. And we're so proud to be able to support you so far in a small way, but meaningful way. And we hope to grow that exponentially. So thank you once again for joining us in our Impact Leaders webinar series.
No, my pleasure. And what great company to be a part of. I Equal Change, and I love looking at all the projects you've supported, going onto the website and seeing such a vast array of impact across so many different sectors. Really love as well and amazed by seeing what tangible impact has been amazed. You've raised nearly $9 million for so many different charities. It's a huge piece of work, but I think it really gives back, and you're really helping charities and not-for-profits lead where that impact needs to happen as well. So we're in really good company.
Thank you. You are in good company. We do a lot of due diligence on our NGO partners, and we're really passionate about who we support and making sure the funds have the greatest impact. And so we're very happy to have you as part of the family.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Cheers, Adrian. Thanks again.
No worries.